kick us off. So my name is Zach Hotoff. I am joined today by McKenna Lowry, as well as our co-leader, Sarah Dillon of the New York City chapter. We are about to jump into Agent State of Mind. This is the first event that the New York City chapter has hosted on Slack AI, and it's all leading up to the biggest Slack and Salesforce Hackathon hosted here in New York City on Monday and Tuesday, and the Agentforce World Tour on Wednesday. And we'll talk a little bit about that soon. But we're most excited to have McKenna on because she is the design architect for Slack AI. So I will be grilling her on all of the little details of what was going on when they were building Slack into, or building AI into Slack, and what were those design decisions. And with that, I am going to keep moving us forward. I love to add this slide just in case McKenna wants to throw in some of those juicy details, but this is a forward-looking statement slide. If you have been to any Salesforce or Slack presentation before, this is essentially a slide that I'm sure you will not have time to read, but please do not make purchasing decisions based on what you hear today in the market. So a quick introduction to the Slack community. Some of you, this might be your first event ever. But this is the New York City chapter event, but we are virtual, so we're excited to see a global audience joining us. We have a bunch of chapter leaders coming in, but we also host real events in New York City in real life. And if you join us in #MembersNYC in the Slack community workspace, you can find out about those events as well as on email. First off, a massive thank you to this community chapter. It's crazy to see how much we've grown in just the last year alone. We've more than doubled our growth, and we've thrown some amazing events in the city. Just to call out a few, that top right corner, we hosted an event with Glide Apps on how to build Slack apps in real life. We had a nature walk where we talked about our life with work and how our relationship with Slack as we walked through Central Park. And we also had the Slack community come together to inside of the Salesforce Tower to learn more about how Slack can be used for customer success. And Sarah, our co-leader, was actually one of the panelists during that session. Again, I would love to reintroduce McKenna. I'll introduce you 8,000 times today, McKenna, but she is the design architect for Slack AI. She just flew in from San Francisco to give us all of our details, but she is based here in New York, which is so exciting that we have a local joining us for this Slack community event here in New York City. I love to have this slide because we can never have enough people in the Slack community, especially in Slack. So you're all now in the Slack community just by being part of this event, but my favorite is having you in Slack with us. So here is how to join the Slack community workspace. If you go find your email, it should look something like your order from Slack community for this event. You'll find in that email, there is a join us in Slack button. Please click on that button. And if you are a New York City member or just love New York City, like everyone probably in this group, jump in and find the members, #MembersNYC channel, and you will find us in there. I would look forward to seeing you all join us, and please jump in, ask questions in there. We'd love to be able to take community advice on what the next events you'd want to hold as well. So I also am excited to mention there is a hackathon going on in New York City on November 8th and 19th. That is Monday and Tuesday of this week. I was very lucky to be an early pilot demoer of what this hackathon will look like. I used to work at Salesforce, and it was actually incredible to watch how much has gone on the Agentforce side of things, right? Whether it's prompt builder, grounding with all the vectors and embeddings. This is a great way to go learn about how to use Salesforce and Slack to build agents at work. And you will be winning prizes as part of this hackathon. So if you are looking to form a team for this hackathon, the great Jacob Gross and I have built a workflow inside of Slack. You can find that in the #MembersNYC channel to build your team for the hackathon in New York City. At the same time, on Wednesday, following that hackathon, there's going to be the Agentforce World Tour in the Javits Center. If you've been to a world tour before, there are a ton of fun, ton of knowledge, all brought in for New York itself. It is free, I mentioned. That is very unique because Dreamforce can get quite expensive. We all know that, but this is actually a free event. So if you're interested in attending, please, you can scan this QR code. You can go to salesforce.com/events/world tour/NYC, and you will find the Agentforce World Tour happening on Wednesday. I look forward to seeing you there. If you get there early enough, yours truly will be hosting another event on Slack AI at 9 a.m. So we'd love to see you at a live in-person event at Agentforce World Tour. So with that, that is covering everything I can on the introduction to the NYC chapter. So I'm going to hand it over to McKenna, where we are going to cover everything Slack AI and design. And I will stop sharing my screen so we can bring McKenna up. And look at that. We're at 56 people attended McKenna, more than I expected and wanted. So it's so exciting. All right, McKenna. So the most important question, the question that we're all waiting for, is you have to tell us now your favorite emoji and why, and feel free to pick that absolute top one.
Yeah, so my most used emoji is probably like incredibly boring, something like a plus or whatnot. But my favorite thing to do is, you can imagine, like, at this point, Slack has quite the custom library of emojis, and I just go in and write into the search like my current feeling or emotion and see what people have come up with. Most recently, I think my favorite has been call back to the chat and the eye roll emoji. It's actually an animated eye roll, and once it gets all the way around, it actually drops out of the eye sockets and rolls away. So that is probably my top emoji right now. It's quite amazing.
I love that. And then what we also love to find out is, tell us your story with Slack. How did you find the company? And really, what makes like being on the Slack team so compelling for you?
Yeah, so I've actually been at Slack for about 6.5 years now. I joined in 2018. Before I joined, I think I was already a Slack user for maybe 3 to 4 years. A few startups I had been working at used Slack. And I think I felt what most people felt, and hopefully still feel in using Slack, which is just, it just unlocked a completely different way of working with your coworkers. And it was just so delightful. It just, like, around every corner was just like a little moment that made you smile and feel like appreciated as a worker. So when I saw, the job opening in New York, I jumped at it because there weren't many opportunities like that back then, before, really the Silicon Valley like spread out to other cities. And I still feel incredibly lucky that I got the job, and I've been there for quite some time now. So that speaks to how much fun it's been, and how many great opportunities I've had to design across the product.
And yeah, tell us a little bit more. So you started, what was the first role at Slack, and how did you grow into the role that you have now?
So at the time, the only team based in in New York was search. So I spent my first few years solely focusing on the search experience, and trying to make all the improvements we could there. And then gradually over time, I moved more to like our core foundation team, working on messaging and channel experiences, before, I think, 1.5 years ago, moving to the AI team.
So cool. And that's a great transition for us to start learning a little bit more about Slack AI, and also agents and how this all plays together.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's so new. I think it's always fun to ask, like, to everyone, like to you, McKenna, how would you describe Slack AI? I know that's a weird question, but like, how do you describe it when, like, in your day-to-day, what are people saying about Slack AI at Salesforce and at Slack?
Yeah, so I think, like, just like very obviously, it's like a SKU that we're selling that layers AI into the Slack experience. But more in terms of like how we've approached it on the design side is, we've got AI is moving really rapidly. There's a lot of trepidation around it. We don't want to just like plug it in and make it feel like an add-on. So we've really approached it in terms of like, how can we use AI to solve problems that we have in Slack? And so it's really about improving the experience with this new technology as much as we can. all in
Amazing.
the hopes of, continuing to delight users and helping them to work better.
Okay, yeah, let's jump into that one. Like when you think of users, like when we think of, okay, who benefits from Slack AI, you were thinking like, okay, these user personas, right? They're called in the design world. What were the qualities of these people? Like who essentially is Slack AI built for, and who's going to get the most success from it?
Yeah, so we definitely built it with specific users in mind, but it was a little bit more framed around the user problems. And so the two that we knew from research that our users face, first was just noise in Slack. We know the more your company builds up history in Slack, the more channels you have, the harder it gets to kind of sift through that noise and not get distracted. And so, we wanted to use AI to help with that. And that's largely where our recap feature came in on the Slack AI SKU. We wanted to help users focus on the most important questions and be able to kind of automatically summarize everything else that wasn't quite as urgent, but they needed to keep an eye on. The second problem is it's just hard to find things in Slack over time. And, having worked on search for so long, it's actually been really nice to come back to it with AI because there was just some problems that we really struggled to solve. And so that's where our search answers experience comes from. Now it's as easy as asking a question in search and you can get an answer from our AI, and that kind of like sums up what you need to know. So we definitely, and I think we continue to think about it this way. It's like, what is the problem we're solving and how can AI uniquely handle it?
Very cool. And I think the thing that's impressed me is like what we always forget, Slack's only like a decade old, right? Like that's a wild thing to say because it feels like something that's been part of our lives for so long. But it's super cool to see how fast Slack AI has been getting delivered by your team. So like what's the approach to delivering at Slack? Like how does your team think about product delivery and delivering for these users?
Yeah, so we did a little bit differently on this team at the start. So we were kind of all brought together as a team. I think it was last August, not 2023, and given the mandate to ship Slack AI in 6 months, which was incredibly incredibly tight. But it was also really exhilarating because we just had a really small team. We collaborated really well. Like I've collaborated with designers my entire career, but never in this way. Like at the time, my team was made up of, I had another product designer, Wee Yatani, a content designer, Zara Fishkin, and then our manager, Omar Lee. And we were just literally passing design files and ideas back every single day. And there was no single owner of any experience. We were really working on it all together. And the same went for our engineering and product collaborators. We were just we knew what we needed to do. We knew what we were going to ship, and we just moved really quickly together. And that was quite amazing. And we were learning so much in real time as we went. Since then, we've definitely gone back to a little bit more how we traditionally work in Slack. And I think why we are able to continue to just release more value very quickly is because we're so dedicated to prototyping the path and dog fooding our own product. So I think that's also one of the most interesting things about AI is that really anyone can drive an idea, test it out. There's so many different products out there that are enabling people to do and try things. And so we are just constantly taste testing, trying things out, seeing what sticks, getting feedback on it, iterating, and getting it out.
Yeah, and I think it's very cool to see how much the Slack team itself uses its own product, right, to build Slack. And like you mentioned, the dog food, your product to actually jump in and say, is this helpful for me? Because we all use Slack very similarly, right? And
I've never worked at a company that does it quite like Slack. And there's certainly downsides, like you can't drink too much of your own Kool-Aid. And that's where our research team comes in, our beta and pilot testing. We also are we are constantly bringing in feedback from other sources as well to kind of balance out our own thinking and feelings.
And I'm going to make a quick call out on the Slack community itself that the best way to join one of these pilots is actually to be in the Slack community, because your team is constantly posting
Yeah.
new like pilots to join. So if anyone is interested in joining some of these pilots, please find in the Slack community, you can find some of these pilots going live pretty much like every month, because you can see how fast the Slack team is moving. So we're gonna get into the tough questions, McKenna, because I think that's always fun to have you on the hot seat. But Slack AI is not free. You know, it didn't come with any of the SKUs that had existed for the last 10 years. It's actually an add-on product. Could you tell us some of the decision making of why Slack AI was priced as a separate SKU and built the way it was?
So I'm just a designer, so I can't speak to all of those decisions and all the thinking. But I will say, things are moving so quickly in this space, and I think the entire industry is figuring out how to do this. And I mean, the bottom line is it's just not cheap to run all of this stuff. And that's actually been another interesting challenge for me as a designer to design around. We don't want to be wasteful in terms of cost. We don't want to be wasteful in terms of the environmental impact. And so that's been really something interesting to navigate.
Yeah, and I think AI for every product has been kind of interesting. Like we struggle with it too, is like, how do you price for something that's changing so rapidly too?
Yeah, and you don't even know how successful the feature will be and how much usage it will drive, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We are still in that like early nascent days of what AI is going to look like, especially as it continues to get cheaper and better over time. So
yes, that's the hope.
Very cool. So let's jump into the process. So as you were building Slack AI, what were some of the things, like these aha moments or these like discoveries that you had along the way that you're like, oh, this is something that could truly unlock what we're trying to achieve here?
I think like the aha moment I always think of is like we really landed on summarization as like a broad focus area, like something we knew AI does pretty well and we thought would be valuable to our users. And our first iteration of it, which is available today, channel and thread summaries, allows you to just kind of like go to any channel or thread, hit a button and get a summary. But it wasn't as useful and as sticky as we would have liked. And so we quickly realized that part of like the promise of AI is like the magic of it. And people have really high expectations of it, given how much we're talking about, how much money everyone's putting into it. And so we kind of realized that, there's quite a difference between push and pull experiences. So pull experiences are ones, like I said, where you just go manually pull for something. Push are moments where we can predict smartly that you are probably going to want something and get ahead of it so it's ready as quickly as possible, or it's just there. And so I think we've, as a team, really changed our focus more recently to figuring out how to do those push experiences. And I think that, again, going back to recap, that was kind of one of our first ones. It still requires a little bit of manual setup, but once it's there, it's just automatic, right? It's scheduled every day. It's pushed to you. You don't have to think about it. And so, yeah, we're going to be releasing a lot more features like that in the future.
Okay. And I like the way you've pitched it as like push and pull, it's almost like reactive versus proactive. How do you create experiences, AI experiences that are just seamless, right? Things that I don't even need to know how AI works or understand it, and I can just bring it to the end user.
And of course, you still have to balance that with the cost. Again, going back, it's like you don't want to just be doing something that no one's going to interact with and use and then waste that, that money and that moment.
No, and that's a good segue, I think, into like the hundreds of crumpled up designs. Like, I think, of course, we imagine all designers, you guys are essentially working, you hate it, you throw it into the trash and you start again. What were those, like, not the aha moments, but the moments of, oh, like I messed up, this is not the direction, here's where we went wrong, or maybe even like, here's where there's more opportunity to make it even easier?
Yeah, I mean, if I think of that, I go back to that summarization example where it's just like we didn't quite get it in the right way. But but I think what's more interesting, it's like when I think of the crumpled up designs, it's more like it's not stuff that we were like, oh no, this is garbage. It was like not now, maybe later. And so in that regard, I have to be careful about what I share there, because who knows when we might come back to those things. But I will say, like working on Recap again, there were so many interesting iterations of it that didn't quite work out. Like the first version of that looked much more like a newsletter or a newspaper, and was much more like topic based. And I still think that's something that we want to explore and go back to, like instead of just orienting it completely around like the channel or the conversations. We also talked about like PTO recaps and other iterations of it that I think are very much still on the table for the future, but just didn't make it into that first iteration.
Oh, and I like the PTO recaps because, right, you have the out of office message,
Yeah.
Right? Like, could Slack, because you're such a work oriented app, right? Like, can we build it for how most people want it, right? Like how, like not just a generic platform, but really like opinionated. Slack has strong opinions on how people should work. We all kind of have figured that out. The fact that you can't have a read message, and that you guys have fought that for 10 years is, I think, everyone's, every individual contributor's dream and every manager's nightmare, but we all love that. Is that the way you're also thinking about Slack AI, of adding in like work-based opinions into AI?
We definitely do, but we have to be careful about it, because you don't want to, like, we can't, like, I'm really proud of like that example. I know I'm proud of other things that we've done that like really, I think, even though I think some people look at Slack as like maybe something that brings them back into work too often, like we make a lot of decisions that hopefully create boundaries for users, like the red message one. And so I'm really proud of that. And we definitely still have those conversations about features, and we just have to kind of weigh it. So again, I'll go back to Recap. One of the things that Recap did or does is it automatically mutes any channel you add to the recap, because we had a strong stance on how to use it. Use it for your kind of second tier channels, and then mute them so that you're not distracted by them all day. But we've definitely seen people, since we've released that, come out with like, and you can turn it off. You can unmute the channel, but we were like, had this strong stance that you should mute by default. Since then, we've learned so much about how people are using that feature. And I think we will probably walk that back a little bit and make it more of a choice in the moment, because there are multiple ways to use Recap. So it kind of depends. I think sometimes we do go a little too far and we need to pull it back. Other times I'm really proud of what we do, but it's definitely something that we're discussing all the time amongst the team in terms of what to do.
Okay. I think that's I like that approach. You kind of take it forward, you take a step back, you go two steps forward, you take a step back, right? Because you're still like a big company, but you're experimenting along the way.
Yes.
You don't want to slow progress down, and you want to learn from like users and not from yourselves, right? Like that's the key one.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the dog fooding, right? Like we're using it. We want users to use it. So we're trying to get out a version of it as quickly as possible once we feel it's good. Quality still really matters to us. We don't want to release something that feels bad. But we also don't want to like get bogged down in these like existential questions either.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm going to jump into the chat and be able to make sure that I get some of these questions. I did want to just call out, it won't be a question to you exactly, McKenna, but a great question came in from Sangeeta about, is anyone here attending the hackathon? I've attended coding hackathons, but I don't know Salesforce, so not sure if it's right for me. And I would just want to make sure that I highlight that it is surprisingly easy. It's all no code. Nicole just posted as well. I think Nicole's a great example. She walked into that room without having known vectors and embeddings and all that, and left that room being like kind of this AI. Yeah, there she is in the chat, like AI wizard now, being able to explain it. So I do recommend, if you don't have an AI background, actually to go in and learn about what's going on, as well as even a Salesforce background, because it is impressively powerful. And then I will jump into the other questions. There are a few, I'll kind of wrap a few of them up into this pricing thing. And I know you're not the right one to ask, McKenna, but this is actually, every time we do this, pricing is probably like 50% of the questions. So I think I will phrase it differently, because I know you can't like make those definitive decisions. But let's talk about more of like the incentives of Slack and Salesforce. Like Slack and Salesforce want to get AI into as many hands as possible, right? Like they see it as a differentiating part of the product. So how do you think, and again, this is, we're all under wraps, and we know McKenna doesn't operate the pricing team, but how do you think like 5 years from now, do you think Salesforce will still have a separate SKU, or Slack as well? Or do you think it will actually become part of the product? Like if you had to look into your fortune telling world, how does AI incorporate into this tool today?
I'm not a fortune teller, so I'm not going to take the bait on that one. I don't know, but I mean, it goes back to, I think, what we were discussing earlier, which is things are like changing rapidly. And I think the hope is that the stuff is going to become a lot cheaper and easier to run. We're going to learn things. And so if that happens, then inevitably ...
Yeah, no, and that's a great safe answer. I think you could see I was leading with that question. I have my predictions. And then I do see a question that it's around LLMs, but I do actually, we'll ask a more general question around that. Is like the models are changing almost faster than the technology can keep up. How is the Slack team, and I know this is probably more along like the engineering and even deep engineering level, how is the Slack team thinking about like having a diversified models or even multimodal models, right? So that, just so everyone knows in the audience, those are models that don't just look at text, but even look at images and videos and voice, which we know Slack is so powerful at. How is the design team thinking about incorporating future modalities into the Slack ecosystem?
Well, here's where I'll give like just a huge shout out to our engineers. They are so passionate about this space. We all have a bunch of channels. We're just sharing like every new product, every new model that comes out, what you can do with it. We're all demoing them, we're using them. And so that creates just a lot of excitement and idea building and brainstorming that we all do together. And then so many of our engineers just like jump in and try stuff. And it's, it goes back to what I said earlier in terms of like how we work, and like ideas can come from anywhere. My skill set is design. And so when I have an idea, I try to visualize it and explain it and show it off and see if there is a way to do it, or if it speaks to someone who might want to try to prototype it. Engineers can just jump right into the code and just try some stuff. And I've seen so many like cool demos from them, like exploring all different stuff. So I would say sky's the limit here. Like there's nothing where like we're not, like there's no conversations of like we're not going to do this. It's more like what is the most useful, what problems does it solve, and where does it fit into the product?
I think that, yeah. So I think going into like the future of Slack, I'm going to spin it into the next question. So these are some questions from Adam, Christine. I see one from Katarina. It's kind of like looking to the future. What are the things that you, the engineering team, are like most excited about building? Katarina is asking about dashboards. We've got Christine asking just in general, what are the features that like the team is most excited, and Adam as well. What's most exciting about the future?
Yeah, so we still have a lot to do in terms of like solving the problems I raised earlier in like noise and finding stuff. So we're still focused there. New focus areas are prioritization and assistance. That's, we're talking about agents today. And then going back to that push versus pull, we want to do more automatically. So I'm currently working on our agent experience in Slack, including Agentforce, which is key to that assistance track that I mentioned. It's really fun. It's really exciting. There's so much we can do there. And then we have a number of, really exciting features coming in the next quarter or so, like auto file and thread summaries, in product translations, enterprise search. There's so much that we're working on across the team.
Very cool. So here's what I'll do. If there is one last question. So the next part of this agenda, we're basically at halftime. What we're about to do is I'm going to move over to some slides that I've created. They're going to be very similar to my session at World Tour, but we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into the product itself. And McKenna, we're going to ask her very detailed questions of what kind of you'll see inside of Slack and the decisions behind some of that. But if there is a last question, I'm happy to take it, and then we can jump into that while I get my screen up and ready. And if I don't see one, I'll just keep going. All right. So I'm going to just share my screen. You're getting a sneak peek of what I'll be presenting at World Tour, but I think it's a great moment in time to just kind of test like what we're learning here. Some of the details are on generative AI. And so by the end of this very short little talk that I'll be giving, you're going to understand what are Slack agents and how they can help your organization. The base dictionary for generative AI, I think we all want to learn as much as possible about it. Be more like Nicole. The levers and controls within the Slack Agentforce platform. And I'm sure Jillian's mad at me for putting all these words together, but we will talk a little bit about language and how to talk about Slack, and then how to get started and bring back important knowledge. So this is pretty funny. I did not update this slide. I was lucky enough to be, ironically, one of the faces of the Agentforce team. But I love this slide because there's actually a really important thing to talk about with this slide. So we need a conversational interface where humans with agents work together, connected to data, workflows, and apps, so we can search, act, and collaborate. And I love this question. All right, so you know what we'll do? If you answer this question correctly, you will get swag. What is the most important word on this slide? And I'll take a few guesses. If you get it correct, you get Slack swag. So let's see if we get it. We've got humans and I love them all. We haven't quite gotten it yet, but you guys are getting pretty close. There are definitely some folks that are on the right track. Let's see. I'll give it 5 more seconds. I think there's, we'll throw in some last Hail Mary guesses. It's the last word you would ever expect. All right. I'm going to close it out in 3, 2. Oh, we got it. The last second, Elio got it. And here's actually why. And I'll explain why, because I was part of a focus group. The most important word here is that with, actually. It's shocking. There's a ton of features. There's a ton of functionality. But that with right there is actually the most important word. And here's why. Because the way that Slack is thinking about humans with agents is that agents are actually a tool set. It's not humans and agents sitting alongside each other. It's agents that are able to work for these humans, that are able to take all this data, these workflows, these apps to search, act, and collaborate. And humans with agents are going to be the most powerful part of this platform, because humans are the most important part of what Slack works with. And it's with agents, not and agents, that are going to bring it all together. So, Elio, hopefully I'm saying your name right. You are the winner of our swag. We will figure that out, how to get you that. But so exciting. Thank you for answering that question. Just a quick thing on me, just so you understand my background. I am the co-founder of a company called Tighten-It. We are a community platform built for Slack to help B2B SaaS and professional organizations run their communities on Slack. I have been part of the Slack community since February of this year. So excited to have seen us grow like crazy. And I actually have a background at Salesforce. I used to work as director of product for Community Cloud. And then ironically enough, worked at a company called AirKit, which is now, most of that team is working on the Agentforce platform. So I do have a small background in AI, and we'll jump into that now to explain some of the key things, and these are slides made by me, not by the Slack team, but I like to kind of summarize the way from an outsider's perspective, what we should be thinking about with Slack and AI, because Slack AI is an actual product that is sold Slack. It includes all the things that McKenna is working on across search and recaps, transcriptions, and many more of those modalities that we were talking about coming soon, of like how to bring AI into a first-party solution. But there are many, many partners, thousands of apps that are in the Slack marketplace. And those third parties, similar to businesses like our own and Adobe and Write, who just got a big investment from Salesforce Ventures, all of these companies are thinking about how to bring their AI experiences into Slack. And this is where AI agents in Slack come so much into play. It's the peanut butter and jelly experience that we are all looking for. So we're going to jump into, how does AI really work, right? What is going on behind the scenes? Because we don't exactly know, right? We're all trying to figure this out. There's so many different layers to the stack. And I want to give a quick, kind of summary, this glossary of the most important words that you should be thinking about, and a cheat sheet of how you can envision these words in an analogy that we'll see if it really fits. So a large language model is an AI model that's trained on vast text data to understand, generate, and interact with language. A retrieval augmented generation system, so we hear this as RAG. This is a word we hear a lot, is like grounding. How do we take content and bring it to the LLM so it understands what we want to talk about? It gives context to these LLMs. And then Nicole's favorite word with vectors and embeddings. These are the data representation of information. So taking a bunch of different data and understanding how to represent it across an array of dimensions. That was a lot of words. Probably made no sense to some of you. So I'm going to try my analogy that I have tried to explain. Let's start from the bottom with vectors and embeddings. The way I've always thought about embeddings is essentially judging something across thousands of dimensions. And I put it as, think of it almost like how much sad, how much marinara sauce. It could be across any dimension, right? And it's judging the text based on how closely it fits within those realms. But it's being judged across thousands of these. And so with thousands of these generations being done, you can find the similarities between texts. And that is how these retrieval augmented generation experiences work. So we like to think of an LLM as this genius. It can talk pretty much about anything in the world, but it doesn't always know what to talk about. What you want to do is provide the cheat sheet so that the LLM is able to understand what the context of the question you're asking. You're grounding it in information that then provides the LLM with an understanding of your business, an understanding of your customer, or really just an understanding of whatever you are trying to talk about. That's the RAG-based system that's going in, grabbing information, and bringing it back to the LLM. I'm still working on this analogy, would love everyone's feedback, but I'm doing my best to be able to take these pretty complex terms and bring them back so you can seem really cool at the next dinner party. So we're going to jump into, how do I build one? There are a few developers, I'm sure, on this call. We will quickly talk at a high level about some of these primitives. So you can go and build Slack apps as a developer today, and we will show you how that can be done. These all start with scopes. This gives the Slack app the ability to kind of access parts of the user experience. And there are a few APIs that are available to you. One of those is the set status. This allows you to set kind of this message while the AI is doing the work. Some of these AIs can take 10 seconds, if not longer, to think, and you want to be able to provide a user experience for your customers to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Set suggested prompts. We'll ask McKenna a little bit about this as well. Is like, it's very hard to get started with AI without knowing what you're going to ask. So could you create these prompts to kind of trigger an understanding for the user to be able to go and ask a question to get the juices flowing? And then finally, set title. If you've used ChatGPT before, one of the most fun things is at the end of a conversation, you'll find that conversation is using AI itself to summarize it for you, to give it a title that you can then go back to. That is the set title API. And then there are 2 fun new events. These are kind of events that get triggered for your app. One of those is a user talking to the assistant, like the moment in time at which an assistant has been triggered so that your app can go and understand that, as well as I think one of the coolest ones that's really in my mind like Slack specific is as you traverse through different channels, can we feed the AI an understanding of what the user is looking at? Can we tell them, hey, this user has moved to a new channel, and give them a new context so that the AI is getting that RAG, essentially, that system in place so it understands the context behind the things. So that's a lot. Again, feel free to ask questions in the comments. But we'll talk a little bit, McKenna. Here's where I'll have you even jump back in on like agent personalization, right? Because we're going to live in a world where there's going to be a bunch of agents in Slack, potentially thousands of agents in Slack. Mm-hmm. How is your team thinking about like individual users, right? There are some marketers on the line, there's some HR people, there's some engineers. We're all going to have different agents than one another for working. How is your team thinking about bringing those experiences into Slack personalized?
Yeah. So I think as you continue to go through the slides, we'll look a little bit more in like how this experience looks today. And like the first thing I want to call out is, as I spoke to earlier, we release stuff, we get feedback, and we iterate. And so we're continually learning, and I expect, parts of this experience to change over time. And I think the question you ask is a really good one. We do expect over time for users to kind of gather more and more agents, particularly from Agentforce, that do very specific tasks. And so on my end, it's really about how can I make these agents like feel like first-class citizens that are readily available at any time for quick access without, something we always worry about in a design team is the more we add to Slack, the more complicated it gets. And that's why we so often do redesigns, which I know users are not always so excited about, but it's just something we have to do to keep things from like getting completely out of control. And so that's something I have to balance, right? How do I make these agents feel like first-class citizens without overwhelming users who might not need them all the time or whatnot? So we really want any of the agents to be readily available kind of right there when you need them. We want it to be really easy to get back to past conversations if you need to get something from that. Those are kind of like all the questions and things I'm thinking about right now as we continue to improve the experience.
And I'll take a question as well from Sarah, who brought it in from Abraham. But what are the most common AI agents that Slack is either exploring or seeing from third parties that are coming in to kind of make Slack a better AI-based experience?
When I design for this, I'm not actually designing for any one specific type of agent. I'm really designing a system so that any agent can come into Slack and work in a predictable way for the user. So I'm not really seeing like a pattern yet of like certain types of agents. I'd say it's more like, at least on the third party side, it's every company is kind of figuring out what is my AI strategy, how can we be useful, and trying that on the agent/assistant side. Obviously, there's a lot in terms of composition because Slack is at the end of the day a writing tool. And then on the like Salesforce, Agentforce side, it's really about providing quick access back into like all the things that you rely on Salesforce to do, and scoping down agents to do very specific and helpful tasks.
Amazing. Thank you, McKenna, for the deep answer. If you got any follow-up questions for McKenna, feel free to keep throwing them in the audience. The next one I'm going to have for you too, McKenna, is these new contextual agents, right? And so we have these new experiences of threads that can now be, like we talked about before, like these proactive or reactive experiences that can live inside of our channels and actually be remember the word with. We have these agents with us alongside as we kind of answer questions inside of our Slack workspace. So what are your thoughts on, like, again, that context, right? We have these agents next to us. How do we know when to bring them in? And how do we make sure that in the future agents can just come up whenever the proactive experience is ready?
Yeah, so we're right now still, I think, really focused on bringing in the agent at the right time with the context you have and like getting you into the right container to have that conversation. One thing that is a little limiting about this side panel right now is sometimes these conversations are really robust and it's like a very narrow view to do that. So it's like it's very interesting challenge. Like in some ways, Slack, because it's so conversational, feels really natural to bring agents in. And then in other ways, like because it's moving so fast and different assistants like ChatGPT and others are like creating these new patterns that users are getting used to, like creating a new conversation every time, aren't really how Slack works. And so one of the most interesting challenges for me as a designer is trying to align those two things, make this feel seamless in Slack while also doing kind of what people expect from other products. And so we still have a lot of work to do to get that in a good place.
And I think one fun thing that I've noticed is that when you create an agent, it's probably not used yet, but Slack has you describe what the agent does, right? Yep. I guess I'm going to have a leading question, but is the future just, if I can describe the agent well enough, will Slack be able to bring my agent in based on kind of a user's individual problem?
I mean, I go back to like sky's the limit, like anything is possible down the road. But I do think like education, discoverability is another piece like I need to focus a lot on like in this role. Because especially when you have so many agents, like how can you find the one to do the task that you need easily? How can it be brought in at the right moments? It's all challenges that we have to kind of figure out.
Well, thank you again, McKenna, for letting me ask you all the hardball questions. We are now going to jump into Slack, which is fun. And I will stop sharing my screen for a moment while I bring up a different screen. And we will then actually see an agent in action. And this is, for context, this is an agent that I went out and built just to give it a try, see what the experience looks like. And it is surprisingly easy to get set up. That said, of course, I do have some background in AI and Slack, so I take it with a grain of salt. But what we're going to look at is what I've gone ahead and done. I've loaded in everyone's favorite subject, maple syrup. I've put in a ton of maple syrup facts into a RAG-based system. And so our next step is, could we surface some of this content inside of a agent? And I actually have a question for you, McKenna, that I recently discovered. So one of the fun things, so I just clicked on my new app. There's now two new tabs, chat and history. What I have a question for you on, McKenna, is before we used to end up on the home tab. Mm-hmm. Now we go straight to the chat tab. What was the decision making on that? I'll open up there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's like always been a little bit of like a strange oddity about like some apps that we have. Like Google Calendar is the one I think of. Like you're probably going to Google Calendar for a notification you receive, but you land on home. It's never quite felt right. And so, true to like what I said earlier, we're not going to like we're always like trying not to repeat mistakes. And so when it came to agents, we asked ourselves like, well, what does the user probably want to do if they're opening this agent? More likely than not, they're trying to start a new conversation and get right into a new chat with the agent to do something. So we believe that's more central than even getting to recent history. Like usually what we find like in regards to history and navigation is users like look at recent searches, for example. Like usually people only click on like their last recent search. They don't really click on their third most recent search. So history is important. You do need to sometimes get back to things, but it's not usually the primary use case or the primary need of the user. So I think that the team designed that around this.
Okay, I see. And I have follow-up questions myself, but for this, we'll just keep going. So we're going to create a new chat, and I did forget to add in the suggested prompts, but I will say one of the fun things about creating a new chat is you can set suggested prompts, and these are just buttons that will show up at the top and will allow you to kind of go to quick answers for your users. So we're going to actually ask about maple syrup production and see if anything comes up. I'm hoping I wrote that correctly. Great. So we've used an AI bot. to go and actually search and bring back discussions. And I wish I had slowed it down, because one of the fun things I think is actually at the bottom. Let's see if I can do it again. Maple Syrup, Canada. I want everyone to watch down here. I think, a lot of AIs are getting faster, but some of them are still quite slow. Right there, you can see at the bottom, it does update for you. So it gives, I think, a little bit like that Slack moment of fun.
Yes. Yeah. And we got to give a shout out to like our content designer on the teams there. Fishkin, who does so many amazing strings for us like that. Like that is the Slack delight, right? Those moments that we can just like slip in that just make it that much better.
Yeah, I mean, we even used it, McKenna, just to tell you what we've done. We've put in famous movie quotes. So it just seemed like a great place to kind of have our own experience of delight in the product. So, yeah, I did want to show kind of some of that, just to kind of, click on some of those questions. I think we're almost at time, but I would have jumped into the context and asked you more questions about that, but we did get some great answers from you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and then reshare my last screen before, and we can close us out. And I will share my screen one more time. So again, I just want to remind everyone, there is a hackathon on Monday and Tuesday of this week. It is going to be a great place to play around with some of Slack AI. You're going to have Salesforce experts walking around the room, helping you actually build your first agent. And I did see like Mark Benioff recently made an announcement. He wants like 1 million agents by the end of the year. So I think that's a big, ambitious goal, but like building the future of work inside of Salesforce and Slack. Very exciting stuff. At the same time on Wednesday, please go ahead and find us at World Tour. It is a free, again, I think there's nothing to lose other than learning a bunch of knowledge. If you get there early enough at 9 a.m., you get to see me give it all over again, and that would be always fun to see some familiar faces. We've done a lot of Q&A, but feel free to keep asking those last minute questions. There is definitely coffee. I do want to, we'll take one question, final question. I'm sure it's probably a very detailed question, but we'll do it anyway. So Andreas asked, is it possible to select the primary tab when opening the app view, or is this fixed based on the app type? Chat for agents or home for classic apps? And actually, that's funny that he asked that, because that's my favorite. That would be the question I would ask too, as like a previous Slack app developer. We're going to struggle, I think, to move to chat because we built so much in app home.
Yeah.
How do we think about a transition of the future?
Yeah, so I don't have a great answer on that. I don't actually know technically. I think, I apologize. This is like my lack of knowledge on the platform side. So it always defaulted to home before, right? It wasn't a choice. We've never offered a choice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say I'm going to take this feedback back to the team and think about it. I think this is just all changing pretty quickly as we figure out. We're like I said, we're getting a lot of feedback now. Zach, you've even given me some feedback as we've prepped for this. So we're going to take that all in. Things will change, and that's something we can keep in mind for the future.
And that's a great follow-up question, McKenna. What is a great way for folks to be able to put more feedback to the Slack team? I have a good answer, but I'd love to hear yours as well.
Well, I was going to ask you, I think I was going to ask you if we have formal ways right now of getting feedback from the NYC community in.
There is, yes. So I'm sorry for cutting you off just for time's sake, but if you join the Slack community workspace, there is a feedback channel in there with a Slack workflow even. So you can actually post feedback to the Slack team. Our great Jacob Gross actually reads every single one of those feedback messages and sends them off to the product team. So if you have any feedback to the Slack team, please join the community workspace, because it is actually the best way to get your ideas into the Slack team's plate. And it's also a great way to find pilots of some of the ideas that you've come up with. So,
and I want to just say, I know that it can feel like you're giving feedback to a black box and no one's reading it, but we really do read it, and Jacob does pass a lot on. And I am someone that actively reads our feedback channels and actively responds and discusses it and asks questions. So like we really are reading and listening to that feedback. So please don't hesitate.
Please do it. Great. And I love everything community related. So let's just, can I get to the next slide? Oh, come on. Please. It's the last slide. Oh, it's because I forgot to add that last slide, but we're going back to this slide because I did want to just say thank you to everybody as part of this community. It's incredible to see how fast this community has grown. And I want to give a massive thank you to McKenna for being our esteemed guest today. She has clearly given us a ton of knowledge on where Slack AI is going. And we will have many more events like this, so please do follow along. And I do want to say thank you to everyone for coming today. And I hope to see at least the New York folks in real life next week at World Tour. And thank you for giving us a bit of your Friday. And thank you again, McKenna, so much for giving us your time.
For having me. I hope I gave people some real answers that they can do something with. And I'm so excited to see kind of, what the developers bring into Slack. It's just all really exciting stuff.
And this recording, by the way, will be reshared to the Slack event. So if you do want to go back and reference it, you can find us there. And I just want to say thank you again to everybody. We will see you next time. Enjoy.
Bye.